We read in this week's Parsha, Parshas Balak, as a result of what happened, that the two giants, Sichon and Og, who were the protectors of Canaan after they were killed by Moshe, the nations of Canaan, they felt vulnerable. Now, how do we stop this nation? They're coming in and destroying us. Balak ben Tzipor is called She'osa Yisrael Amori. Balak ben Tzipor, he had seen all that Yisrael did to the Amori. So Rashi cites the Chazal, the Midrash. Omer elu shnei malochim shoyinu betuchim alayim. These two kings who we relied upon them, lo omdu b'fneim, they couldn't stand in the presence of Klal Yisrael. Onu alachs kam v'kamo, so we definitely are not able to withstand the onslaught. Leficha vayoger Moav, they were literally paralyzed with fright. How do you contend with this nation? Over here, the Kli Yakar says something very beautiful. We find there many references over here to Klal Yisrael. First it begins, he had seen all that Yisrael did to the Amori. Yisrael. The next verse writes, Vayoger Moav b'nei ha'om od ki rafu. They were overwhelmed with fright because of the people. Vayokotz Moav b'nei Yisrael. Moav was frustrated because of now Bnei Yisrael. It starts off Yisrael, now it's Bnei Yisrael. What is each one of these appellations or references, what is it referring to? So he says, regarding the first, Vayar Balak ben Tzipor is called She'osa Yisrael Amori. He explains that kings, they had chronicles where they had information recorded exactly, accurately, as it happened at the particular time in history. And they were experts in history, and you learn from history. The masses, everything is hearsay. What people say, what they hear, but it's not necessarily accurate. Yaakov Avinu, he was known as Yisrael. Yaakov, his more spiritual appellation, classification is Yisrael. We're called Bnei Yisrael because we're the sons of Yaakov, which is Yisrael, after he had defeated the angel. You lorded over the angel, God, and man, and you were victorious. When he had given the bracha to Yosef, he says, that I had taken from the Amori, Charbi Bakashti, I had taken with my sword and my bow. What is that? So the Targum, the Aramaic translation is, what's B'char B'kashti? B'tzlusi B'usi. How was I able to defeat the Amori? Through the Kol Yaakov, through my power of speech, my ability through supplication. So the Jew, his power lies in his mouth. That's Vayar Balak. If you deal with a nation which the battle is not conventional, but rather it's on a spiritual plane, and there's nothing that we have in our arsenal that is able to counter that, what do? And he saw it, how he destroyed the Amori. And that's how Klal Yisrael was able to destroy Og, Melech HaBoshan, and Sichon Melech HaMori. It's the same power. The power is part of our inheritance, that we have this ability. Now, how do you stop them? V'yoger mor b'nei Yisrael. Now, this b'nei Om, he says that's referring to the rabble. Kirafu. V'yokotz mor b'nei Yisrael. We read in last week's parsha that Moshe Rabbeinu initially wanted to go through the territory of Edom, the Edomites. And Edom says, you cannot come through our territory. Why? Because pen eitzi becherev l'karasecho. I may come out against you with my sword. Because Moshe had given them background information where he had said we had gone to Egypt, we were enslaved by the Egyptians. V'nitzek al Hashem Elokeinu. We cried out to Hashem, we supplicated Hashem. V'yishma Hashem es kolenu. And Hashem heard our voices. So Rashi cites Chazal, what was Moshe saying to the Edomites? These are the descendants of Esau. That we have a bracha from our ancestor, Yitzchok. Hakol kol Yaakov. The voice is the voice of Yaakov. Therefore, God listened to our supplications. When we were Nitzak, Hashem Elokeinu, when we cried out to Hashem, V'yishma Hashem es kolenu, God heard our voices. Because that was the bracha of Hakol kol Yaakov, the voice is the voice of Yaakov. So when Edom heard this, they communicated back, they responded, do you think you're going to intimidate us? That you're telling us that your power of speech brings about results? We also have a bracha. We have a bracha, Charbcha Tichya. We have a bracha from Yitzchak. He says, you shall live by your sword. Therefore, we're not intimidated. The same source of your victory, which comes from Yitzchak, our bracha comes from the same source. And therefore we came out with a sword against you. We're reliant on the sword. And then the Torah tells us, Vayetze likras Yisrael ba'am koved. They came out towards the Jews with a large contingent of people, ubiyot chazoka, with a powerful hand. So Rashi says, what's yot chazoka? Hayidayim de Esau. Yitzchak had said, the hands are the hands of Esau. Which also, this is the power which they ensured victory, the hands are the hands of Esau. So it's interesting. We had pointed out in Parshas Matos, because of what Bilam had done and had suggested and advised Balak, that he had said, Elokeim shel Yisrael sonei zima. The God of Israel, he despises the tests, promiscuity, licentiousness, cannot tolerate, will not tolerate it. So if you ensnare the Jewish men to engage with the women, with the Moabite women, this will cause the wrath of Hashem to come upon them, and we will destroy them. And that's what they did. So Bilam is the one who had given the Eitzah, the advice, how to destroy the Jewish people. When he was coming back to collect his fee, because there were 24,000 men who died in that plague, what happened? So Hashem says to Moshe, go destroy them. Right? Take 1,000 men of each tribe and go to war, you will destroy Midian for what they had done to you. Tzoras Midyanim. And Bilam was there, and Bilam was killed. Bilam was killed, and Torah makes it a point. How is Bilam killed? Hargu as Bilam bechorev. Bilam was killed with the sword. We know the Torah doesn't share information with us unless it's important that we know this information. Does it make a difference? He was killed by the sword, he was killed by the arrow, or he's killed any other way? Why is the Torah making it a point to tell us that he was killed by the sword? So Rashi cites Chazal the Medrash that initially, how did he want to destroy us? To curse us with his mouth. Because as we'll see in a moment, that why did they go to Midian? Because they wanted to find out what is the secret of the Jews. Where does our power lie that we're able to bring about such levels of victory? It's because they said their leader, where did he grow up? Where did he spend many years? In Midian. So they went, they did their research, and they said his koach, the koach of Moshe, lies in his mouth. So they went and they commissioned Bilam, who his power also lies in his mouth. His power to curse. Therefore, Bilam would be a counterforce to Moshe. That's why they commissioned Bilam. So Bilam attempted to curse us with his mouth. But the power of the Goy, the power of the Gentile, that's not his craft. his craft is al char b'chotichya. That is the craft of the non-Jew. His power lies in the sword, not in his mouth. He went and he exchanged his craft for our craft. Rather than coming against us with the sword, he came against us with the mouth, with the power of the mouth. So when we killed him, we exchanged our craft for his craft. And therefore the Torah is making a point. How did we kill him? Not with our mouth, but rather with the sword, which is the craft, which is the profile of the non-Jew. So the difficulty seems to be al-char b'chotichya is what? That is the profile of Edom. Edom says, this is the blessing we received from our grandfather Yitzchak. Al-char b'chotichya, we live by the sword. At the time of Sinai, the Chazal tell us, the Medrash tells us that God offered the Torah to every one of the nations of the world. When he came to Edom, and he says, I want you to accept my Torah. So Edom says to Hashem, says to God, Ma kosev bo, what does it say in your Torah? So Hashem says to Edom, it says in the 10th Commandments, Lo tirtzach. You're not permitted to commit murder. They said, but sorry, we can't accept it. Because we have a blessing from our grandfather, al-char b'chotichya. We have the sword. So it seems to be, what was the response? They understood that al-char b'chotichya was something which was unique to them. Al-char b'chotichya, by the sword you shall live. But yet we find from Chazal that why was Bilam killed by the sword? Because he exchanged his craft for our craft. What's the craft of Bilam? What's his profile? You shall live by the sword. So we see living by the sword is what? Is not the profile of Edom. It's not unique and specific to Edom, but all non-Jews, this is their profile. What is their craft? The craft lies in the sword. By the sword they shall live. Al-char b'chotichya. So how do we understand this? So why did Edom say, the reason why we're rejecting the Torah is why? Because al-char b'chotichya, because that's the blessing from our grandfather, Yitzchak. Therefore we cannot accept the Torah. So seemingly, the whole thing was a misunderstanding. What Yitzchak meant to say, al-char b'chotichya was not a blessing. Now, what was the whole disagreement between, or misunderstanding between Yaakov and Esav? Yaakov was the second child. Yaakov purchased the birthright. Whoever was the birthright, they are the heir apparent to Yitzchak. They will be successor. They are the future patriarch. That was the birthright. What happens? Esav, being who he was, he claimed that he was misled. Yaakov had stolen the birthright from him. That's what he claimed. And therefore he believed he was the heir apparent. He was the one who deserved to be the successor of Yitzchak. What does Yitzchak say after the birthright? So what he understood as a blessing, it was a classification. He says, you're no different than any other Gentile. Your classification is al-char b'chotichya. It's not unique. Rather, when he said al-char b'chotichya, he meant to say that's essence. Your essence is physical, it's disconnected from spiritual, and therefore you live by the sword like every nation lives by the sword. The only one who lives by the power of the mouth, the koach hadibur, is what that's connected to spirituality. That has relevance to the soul. That's the power of the mouth. That's Torah, that's tefillah. That's Hakol Kol Yaakov. So what Esav took as a blessing was not a blessing. It was a classification. But he did say something. As I said, when it says they came out against us, the Yod Chazaka, Rashi says, what was Yod Chazaka? He's quoting the Medrash, Hayidayim de Esav. The hands are the hands of Esav. Now, there's a famous Midrash, the introduction to Echo, which we read on Tisha B'Av, where the nations of the world, they went to the great philosophers of the time, and they said, could we destroy the Jews? How could we destroy the Jews? So they answered them, they said, you have to check a few things. If you go to the Boti Medrashos, you go to the study halls, and you go to the Boti Knesios, and you go to the shuls, and you hear the voice of Torah in the study halls, and you hear the chirpings of the children in the synagogues, you can't do anything to them. Why? Because Yitzchok had said to Yaakov, "Hakol kol Yaakov ha'yadayim Esau," that as long as the voice is the voice of Yaakov, the hands cannot be the hands of Esau. Esau has no power over Yaakov, if the kol is kol Yaakov. However, if you go to the Beis Medrash, to the study halls, and to the shuls where they would teach the children, and you don't hear the chirpings, you find silence, that's when, if the kol is not kol Yaakov, then you dimes the Esau. Then the hands are the hands of Esau. Then you have the upper hand. Then you were able, chas v'sholom, to destroy the Jewish people. That's Edom. Okay? So therefore, that was a reality. It's not a bracha, but who's the counterforce? Who's the counterforce to the Jewish people? We find that Esau, it says, Vayisrotza abona b'kirbo. There was agitation within Rivka's womb. The two, they were fighting in the womb. They were fighting of both worlds. They were trying to who has the upper hand? Does Yaakov have the upper hand? Does Esau have the upper hand? Because they're counterforces. One is a representation of good, the other one's a representation of evil. Where does Amalek, who's the personification of evil? That's Edom. That comes from Edom. Therefore, this is the antithesis of Kedusha. That's Amalek, and that's why Hashem says, Mochu timche, ezecher Amalek tachas hashamayim, he should be obliterated. God said, I cannot tolerate that. From all the Chazal, we only see, like what we see here, Hakol Kol Yaakov, it's always referred to as Koach HaTfilah, supplication, the ability to supplicate Hashem. The only time you see Kol Kol Yaakov is referring to Torah, that's in the Medrash. The Medrash, the introduction to Echo, when they said to them that the voice is not the voice of Yaakov, it's the Botei Medrash, you don't hear the voice of Torah. And the shuls, you don't hear the children chirping, reviewing their studies or being taught. That's when they're going to be vulnerable to the attack of Esau. So there we see that Kol Yaakov is not only the voice of Torah, which is Tefillah, but it's what? It also includes the Koach HaTorah, the voice of Torah. And factually, it definitely is, besides what we see from the Medrash, it's something that's definitely correct. Why was man endowed with the power of speech? To talk gibberish, to talk nonsense, foolishness, to do the real estate deal, to get the hard money, the cheap money, the expensive money. Is that what it's all about? To negotiate the deal. Is that why man was endowed with the power of speech? For that you could write. You don't have to speak. Odom became ruach memalolo. When God infused Odom with his soul, he became nefesh chayo, and the Targum says he became a speaking species. The Gemara tells us in one location that when you study Torah, you're supposed to articulate the Torah, the words. You're supposed to verbalize the words. You need articulation. Because it says in the Pasuk, Chaimi l'motzeim. It brings life to those who verbalize the words of the Torah. It's through the verbalization, it brings it to another level. So that's why man was empowered. Initially, Adam, all nations of the world was supposed to be a perfect world. Because of the chet of Adam Rishon, because of the sin of Deitz Hadas, that's when evil was introduced. But the Koach HaDibor, why was man endowed with speech? Because Bereshis Bara Elokim, because the world was created. What's the objective? For Torah and the people of the Jewish people are Klal Yisrael. B'shul Yisrael Sh'nik Bereshis. So we have to have the Koach HaDibor, the power of speech, to be able to verbalize the Torah. That's the verbalization. Reb Chaim Volozhna, in Nefesh HaChaim, he cites a Zohar that it says in the Zohar that when we study Torah, Hashem simultaneously says the words we say. When you say, Shnai Mochzim Betalis, whatever words you say of Torah, simultaneously Hashem says those same words. Hashem speaks, we speak. Hashem speaks. Hashem said, let there be, whatever he says. So what maintains existence? What maintains existence is when we speak, Hashem speaks. Asor Maimoros. There's an ongoing articulation of God which infuses, which is the energy for existence. But what activates that energy? When we study Torah, we verbalize, he verbalizes it. So again, it's the verbalization. It's interesting. The Gemara tells us in Shabbos, there's a pasuk which we say every morning. It says, "Al tigu b'mishichoi u'b'nevi'ai al toreu." Don't touch my anointed ones, u'b'nevi'ai, and my prophets do not bring harm upon them. What is that referring to? So the Gemara says, "B'mishichai al toreu," it's referring to Tinoku shel beis rabban, children who study in cheder. Unvei al tareu, don't bring harm upon my neviim. These are talmidei chacham. Those are the Torah scholars. So the Gemara says that the world exists behevlon shel tinoku shel beis rabban. The vapor, when the children study and they articulate the words of their studies, the vapor of their mouths maintains existence. That's Hevel Pi and Shel Tinok Shel Beis Rabban. So Rav Papa and Abaye were the greatest of the Amoroim, interpreters of Mishnah. Rav Papa says to Abaye, he says, and what about your Torah and my Torah? They don't maintain existence. Only the children. So Abaye says to Rav Papa, I'll tell you the difference. The child, when he studies Torah, it's vapor which is sinless. It's untainted vapor. Because a minor has no liability. So therefore his power of speech is not tainted. So when he articulates the Torah, his Torah is untainted. Because the power of speech is untainted. But we, as great as you think we are, and whatever insights we present, but the power of speech, we're not perfect, it's tainted. And because it's tainted, it doesn't have the same value. So therefore, what maintains existence? It's Hevel Piyam Shel Tino Shel Beis Rabban. What's Hevel Piyam? Hevel Piyam, that's power of speech. It's power of speech. Rav Chaim Volozhiner writes in his commentary on Pirkei Avos, Al Shloshet Dvar Ma'olam Omed, Al Torah Avodo Gemilas Chasodim. Torah, Avodah Gemilas Chesed. He explains that we find that Yaakov Avinu is Torah. Yaakov Ishtam Yoshev Oholim. So Torah corresponds to Yaakov. Avodah corresponds to Yitzchak. He was the unblemished offering by the Akedah. Gemilas Chasodim, who is the pillar of loving kindness? That's Avram Avinu. Now, what is Torah? See, he says every human being, a Jew specifically, especially, is made up of three components. You have what we call the nefesh. The nefesh is the living life source which exists within every living creature. It means living life source, except the nefesh is the nefesh of a human being. And then you have a ruach. A ruach is called the spirit. And then you have the neshama. Neshama is the soul. He says, what is the function of each one of these components? What is the function of the nefesh, the life source? What's the function of the ruach, the spirit? And what's the function of the neshama? So he says, the ability to think, meditation, thought, that's rooted in the neshama. That's the soul. Ruach is the ability to speak. Ruach means wind. We speak about Hevel Tinok Shel Beis Rabban, the vapor which comes out of the mouth of the children. When you speak, there's articulation. That's the power of speech. Nefesh gives the person to function, to movement. So he says, Nefesh, Avram Avinu was Nefesh. He was the pillar of loving kindness. By the angels who he hosted, Vayoretz L'Krosam, he ran towards them. Movement. That's continuous. That's reaching out, doing for others. Yaakov is Ruach. Yaakov is Ishtam, Yoshiv Oholim. He's the man of the tent of Torah. And as the Gemara says, when you study Torah, you have to articulate it. You have to verbalize it. So that's Ruach. Yaakov is Ruach. Neshama is Yitzchok, because if a Kohen has an improper thought, when he brings the korban, the sacrifice, he invalidates it. But we see again from him, what's Ruach? Ruach is Torah. Because Torah, Kol Yaakov, it's not enough, it's not referring to tefillah only. It's referring to Torah. So it's interesting. The reason why we're able to supplicate Hashem with our power of speech is because what is this power of speech? The power of speech was what was created specifically for Torah. So that faculty of speech is really a faculty that we connect with Hashem. Because Torah is the ultimate level of connection. Yisro v'raisu kuch b'richu chadu. That meshes us. We bond with God through the Torah itself. So if that is the bonding faculty, so what's supplication? Why is Hashem attentive to our tefillah? The reason why God is attentive to our tefillah, because what faculty do we use? The faculty that was given to us, that we are endowed with, to study Torah. That same faculty. And that's the Kol Yaakov. The power of the Jew lies in his speech, because that's that special faculty. There's a famous story, Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, Zecher Tzaddik Livrocha, who was the primary Talmud of the Chofetz Chaim. It was known that the Chofetz Chaim, when he established the yeshiva in Radin, he hired a Rosh Yeshiva. Initially, when he founded the yeshiva, his name was Rav Moshe Londinsky. He was a person, he studied in Volozhin, and he knew the Torah, the whole Talmud by heart. And when he would study, he would study with let's say a student, he wouldn't even have a Gemara. He would read it, everything was from memory. Chofetz Chaim himself could have been the Rosh Yeshiva. He could have been the head of the yeshiva. The only thing he did in the yeshiva, he would give Mussar talks to the students, insights in the Torah. He would give words of Yirut Shamayim, inspire the students to have greater fear of Hashem. That was it. But the actual lectures in Gemara, in Halacha, he would never do publicly. He only spoke in learning with two people. Rabbi Chanan was one of the people he engaged in Torah dialogue. The rest of the students he did not. Why? Nobody knows. And the chavrusa of Rabbi Chanan was the Panovich Rav, who was a young man. Rabbi Chanan was much older than him, maybe 16 years older than him when they studied. So Rabbi Chanan, being the Wasserman, Hashem Yin Nokem Domo, Hashem should avenge his blood. He was killed by the Nazis, Yimach Shemam V'Zichram. So he had a yeshiva in Branovich. Famous yeshiva. It was like a preparatory yeshiva. Students from the age of 17 to 21. Then they would go study in the Mir, Telz, Slabotka, whatever it was. That was his yeshiva. It was called Branovich. They had a few hundred students. And in those days, they had people who were Jews, young men, but they were activists. And they were against religion, and they were called Bundist. This is pre-communism. And one day, They're studying the yeshiva, a few hundred students, and a group of these hooligans come into the Beis Medrash with clubs, and they want to start fighting. They disrupt the study session in the afternoon. Rabbi Chanan sees this, he sees red. You know what it means? That means Bittul Torah times every student who's there. They're interrupting the Torah session, the study session. Rabbi Chanan was a towering person. He was a tall man. He goes over to the leader and he says, "You must leave now with your whole group because you're disrupting what we're doing here." So he mocked him, he laughed at him, maybe he said certain things which were totally inappropriate, and he just ignores him. They want to fight. So Rabbi Chanan says, "You must leave now." He was an older man already. So again, says the same reaction. He says, "If you don't leave now, you will regret it." So as he says, "You regret it," this hooligan picked up his club and he wants to strike Rabbi Chanan. And he says, "Now you must leave." When he said that, this hooligan's hand became paralyzed. He had no feeling in his hand. He was like terrified. So immediately the club falls out of his hand. He runs out with his whole group. They run out. And this was done in the presence of hundreds of students. So they went over to Rabbi Chanan and they said to him, "Rebbe, we never realized you have these supernatural powers. You performed a miracle." His hand became paralyzed. We thought only Hasidic great rabbis, they have this ability. He says, "I want to explain you something." He says, "I'm a student of the Chofetz Chaim." Chofetz Chaim was known. He said from the age of 5 years old, he never spoke Lashon Hara, never listened to Lashon Hara. His speech is pure. He says the power of speech is like you have a knife, very sharp knife, and every time you use it, you oil it, you clean it. As a result of that, the metal never corrodes, and it never becomes dull, it always retains its sharpness. But a person who doesn't take care of the knife and he abuses the blade, ultimately it becomes nicked, it starts corroding, and it becomes dull, it becomes blunted. The power of speech is a spiritual power. I've never abused my power of speech. I'm careful never to say a word out of my mouth that's not an appropriate word. Therefore, my power of speech is what it's supposed to be. Anybody who maintains it at that level, the same thing would happen. So when I spoke to this hooligan and I said out or else, it was the power of speech which is naturally. Because again, what is the power of speech? The power of speech is what? Is a spiritual, a direct, that emanates from one's soul. That's the ruach. The ruach is a derivative of that's when he became a speaking species. But why was man endowed with speech? Because what speech is supposed to articulate is the ultimate of the objective of creation, which is the study of Torah. Because when you study Torah, it has to be articulated for that reason. But that's the understanding. We find that regarding Moshe's dimension of prophecy, it says, "Lo kam navi b'Yisrael k'Moshe." There was no prophet as great as Moshe among Jews, but among the nations of the world, there was a prophet as great as Moshe. Whatever that means, we'll see what it means in a moment. Who's that? That's Bilam HaRasha. God endowed Bilam with a prophecy which had a semblance of Moshe's prophecy. You read about Bilam. Who was he? The man was evil. He was pompous. He had an insatiable need for material. He committed bestiality. He lived with his donkey. He had relations with his donkey. A man like this, you endow with prophecy. The God speaks to him. How do we understand it? What is the reason? So Rashi himself explains, Vim Tomar, why did God allow that his divine presence should come upon this Gentile who is evil. What's the reason? That there should not be an excuse for the nations of the world to say, if we would have prophets, we would have turned over a leaf to be good. So God says, we'll see what you do with the Navi. They give him the prophet. And when they breached the ultimate fence, because from the time of the Mabul, the world was careful in this area. They did not breach this area of what? Of promiscuity. And he breached it. They had some kind of semblance of what? Of control. Not to engage in forbidden relationships. And he advised them they should avail themselves for this promiscuity. So why did God give a Navi Bilam? Why was he endowed with prophecy? So that the nation shouldn't have a claim. If we would have had a prophet, we would have turned over a new leaf. You have to understand. What could you imagine? Well, you need a prophet. Who does he give you? He gives you Al Capone. I mean, could this man lead you to anything good? Or it gives you Barack Obama. He's endowed with prophecy. Could you imagine where this man's taking you? He's taking you straight to the lowest level of Gehenna. That's where he's taking you. So they said, you know why the Jews are so special? Because they have a prophet. But who's the prophet? It's Moshe Rabbeinu. There's nobody who was ever as humble as Moshe Rabbeinu. What kind of prophet did he give us? A man who commits bestiality, a man who's pompous, who suffers from megalomania, a man who's controlled, self-centered, and egotistic. Where's he taking us? So why is that really a response? They still have the claim. Look what you gave us. Look what you gave them. Look what you gave us. But it seems to be prophecy. You never gave us a prophet. If you would have given us a prophet, we would have turned over a good leaf to go in a positive direction. We find, the Gemara tells us that by Kabbalah Torah, could you imagine, we read in the Torah, what was the seed that took place at Kabbalah Torah? It says the mountain billowed fire and smoke. Because God had descended from heaven to earth. The world didn't have the capacity to receive God's presence at that level. The world quaked. It was quaking, as if the world was going to be destroyed. So the nations of the world, what do you think they do? They're in a panic. They run to Bilam, who's their prophet, because he has the readings on this. And he says to them, they say to him, Bilam, God's destroying the world. What should we do? He says, God's not destroying the world. God made a covenant with existence after the great flood. He's not destroying the world. So what are you worried about? So they said, it's true. The covenant was he's not going to destroy the world with water, but maybe now he's destroying with fire. We're worried. What should we do? He says, you people, you're a bunch of fools. Don't you understand? Hashem oz lamo yitain. Don't you understand at this moment God is giving his power to the Jewish people, which is the Torah. So when they heard that, they said, Hashem yivorach samo v'shalom. Let God bless his people with peace. Okay? What do you think should have happened at that moment? What should have happened? They should have said, well, we find Eliyahu Bahar Carmel. They all should have prostrated themselves and say, Hashem hu Elokim. And they should have thrown away their idols and become monotheists. What did they do when they heard this? When their minds were put at ease. We don't have to worry the world's going to be destroyed. They went right back to their lives, to be immersed in everything which is abominable, idolatry, paganism. They went back there. How do you go back there? He told you what it's all about. And he could only tell you because he was a prophet. What was the value of Bilam? That was his only value. His value was that moment. If they would have heeded what he said, then he fulfilled his purpose. So God says, I gave you a prophet. He told you what you're supposed to do. He gave you the inner secrets of what was going on. what the whole world wasn't privy to. Why did people turn over a new leaf? Why didn't you? So you see, you had the prophet, but you say, but he was a lowlife. The man was the most detestable, despicable human being. Doesn't make a difference what he was afterwards. But he gave you the message, and you revered him, and you respected him. You should have taken his advice. You should have taken hold of his insight. Why didn't you? You know, it's interesting. There's a famous word, we read in Pirkei Avos. We speak about Talmidei Avram Avinu and Talmidei Bilam Harosha. Who are the students of Avram and who are the students of Bilam Harosha? Bilam, the evil one. And we speak about that the students of Avram, they actually shared his characteristics, and the students of Bilam, they shared his characteristics. Ruach Gavoah, Nefesh Rechovo, pompous, unsatiable need for material. That's what they were, self-centered. So the question they ask, the commentators ask, what do we have to talk about? Talmidei Avram, Talmidei Bilam. Let's speak about the difference between Avram and Bilam directly. You know who Avram was? Avram was humble. He was controlled. He had no need for materialism. Bilam was the other person, the other end of the spectrum. What do we have to speak about Talmidim? So the answer which is given, I heard the answer many years ago, I don't remember who gives the answer. If you'd look at Bilam, Bilam was a prophet. The Shekhinah came upon him. If you would see him, what would you think? Man's a holy man. He radiates Kedusha. It's misleading. He wears a long black coat. Maybe the birds that fly over his head also burnt. Who knows? The Shekhinah is on him. The divine presence. And the difference. Look what he produces and look what he produces. It's only through the students you understand who they are. Then you understand how evil Bilam was, because look what he's producing. The fruit is poisoned fruit. You see a tree, a beautiful tree. Let's look at its fruit. The fruit is poisoned fruit. Then you know what the tree is. The fruit has all the nutrients and all the taste and all the beauty and what's valuable. Then you understand what the tree is. So you only know who the source was when you see what it produces. That's the difference between Bilam and Avram Avinu. Bilam, Hashem comes to Bilam, and he says, who are these people with you? So he says, they're the people that Balak, Betzibor, Melech Mov Shochei Eloi. They are the people who Balak, the son of Tzibor, who's the king of Moab, who sent to me. Listen to this. So Rashi cites the Medrash. He's speaking to God. Although I'm not valuable in your eyes, but I'm valued by the mortal kings. Although God, you don't value me, but I'm valued by the kings. You understand? We're talking, he's a prophet. God's talking to him. You know what this means? What are you trying to flex your muscle with God? Are you out of your mind? Who are they? The king of Moab sent it to me. The mortal kings value me, but you don't. Of course I don't. You know who you are. You're a despicable human being. The only reason why I endowed you with prophecy is that the nations of the world shouldn't have a claim. Why the Jews are special and they're not special. What is exactly is he saying? Now, why was Bilam valued by the nations of the world? Because he was a prophet. A prophet of what? He was a prophet of Hashem. So God's presence became revered through Bilam. I'm the conduit. I'm the conduit to bring Kavod Shamayim, to bring God's glory to the world. How do you see it? The mortal kings, they all value me. What if they value me? What's my ability? My ability is that I'm representing you. But you don't value me. You don't want to represent me. So therefore, it's not, of course, it's a disrespect, but the way he's presenting it, he says, it doesn't make any sense. Here, I'm your best advertiser, so to say. I'm your best PR person. And you're not interested I should do PR for you. But he didn't understand. We said earlier, he says, I don't want you to curse the Jews. I don't want you to curse them. He says, so I'll bless them. Imagine, here he's going to curse them at a level that he will destroy them, wipe them off the face of the earth as a result of his curse. So he says, if you don't want me to bless them, curse them, I'll bless them. Where are you coming from? What do you mean you bless them? Why do you want to bless them? So Hashem says to Bilam, it's like you say to the bee, Lo mu'uktzach lo bidushach. I don't want your stinger, I don't want your honey. Because each one, they're not separable. Once you get involved with that bee, the wasp, you're going to get stung. There's an expression, anything that emanates from evil is evil. Even the blessing is evil. You think you're ahead, ultimately someday you'll see, and you regret that you ever had any association with that so-called blessing, because the blessing from such a person ultimately is a curse. That's what it is. So therefore, God says, I don't want you to represent me. I don't want. Because you being my representative, what you think ultimately generates Kedusha, generates Chil Hashem. It brings about disaster. Many years ago, there was a story, and my mashgiach, Zech Tzark Levrocha, he had explained something with an allegory from Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, Zech Tzark Levrocha, that sometimes, you want to celebrate certain events where you think by celebrating it, you're doing something good, but ultimately, celebration will cause you to have a setback rather than an advancement. This is the Moshe Rebbe Chanan gave, the allegory. What was the allegory? These two kings exchange ambassadors, ministers. And before they exchange the ambassadors, one king makes a wager with the other king. He says, when your ambassador comes to my country, I guarantee you, I could get him to undress in front of my cabinet naked. He says, so the other king says, who's sending him, he says, impossible, no way, not possible, you can't do such a thing. He says, I could. He says, okay, we'll wager it. If I can't, I'll give you $50 million. And if I could, you give me $100 million. Okay? But they agreed that they can't divulge this wager between the two of them to the ambassador when he's coming. Okay? So what happens? They exchange credentials. He travels off this far-off kingdom, and the king says to him, any offer they make to you, as attractive as it may seem, turn it down, no matter what. That's all he said to him. More than that he couldn't say. Comes to this country, the king invites him that he should eat dinner every night at the king's table. Wines him, dines him, treats him like he's from the inner circle, although he's an ambassador from a foreign government. He's there for a few months. He calls him into his private chamber, the king, which very few people are called into the king's private chamber. He says to the ambassador, he says, something, I'm going to make an offer to you that in the history of existence, such an offer was never made. and you're going to be able to do something for your kingdom that nobody ever did before in the history of your kingdom. If you get undressed in front of my cabinet, in a circle of ministers, naked, for 30 seconds, I will give your king $50 million. See, listens, all of a sudden starts ringing in his ear that his king had said to him, any offer that's offered to you, as attractive as it may seem, turn it down. Don't take it under any circumstance. And he doesn't say it's a word to the king. Next day, the king, again, presents the offer. Day in and day out, presents the offer. Eventually says, this can't be what my king was referring to. Whoever heard, within 30 seconds, a minute, takes to get undressed and dressed, $50 million. I'll bring such glory to my kingdom. It's unheard of. I'll go down in the chronicles of the history of my kingdom. $50 million. And sure enough, he decides he's going to do it. He gets undressed and redresses, and he's ecstatic. He just made $50 million for his kingdom in a minute. In the history of his kingdom, such a thing never ever happened. So he asked permission from the king. Could he be relieved from his duties to travel back? He says, definitely, you should go back. He goes, runs back, travels as fast as he could get there, and he runs through the king's, he asks permission to go to see the king. And he says to the king, he says, what I've done for you, in the history of a kingdom, nobody's done for you. He says, what did you do? He says, I got undressed in front of the other king's cabinet, and I made $50 million. He says, you fool, you made 50, I lost 50, because now I have to pay 100. You have to pay $100 million. What we think is glory, chas v'sholom, is total destruction. He thought he was accomplishing something that's unheard of. But what did it cost? Very often you get carried away, do things, and you think it's the ultimate, and that's the basis for your downfall. Not realizing it. It had to do with a specific event years ago. Story goes back many, many years ago. 50 years ago, where he was adamant he would not allow something to take place because he felt it would be detrimental to the students if he would allow a certain celebration to take place. So I'm saying, Bilam Arosha radiates holiness. He wants to give you a bracha. He's blessing you. The whole world is ecstatic about him. Everybody wants his bracha. Hashem says, Lo miduvshach, lo miutzach. We don't want your honey, we don't want your sting. Anything that emanates from evil, ultimately, it manifests itself that you become cursed. You want to be cursed? Go get a bracha from this kind of person. You don't want to be cursed? Stay away. Remember, there was a dermatologist in Baltimore. He was a Jew, assimilated Jew. His wife was Jewish. And he actually offered his services to the yeshiva students without charge. He had to travel downtown till he got to his office, and his wife was in a wheelchair, paralyzed. And he has a picture of him wheeling his wife into the Vatican, to the Pope, and the Pope is in his office, in his medical office, extends his hand, and he wears a big ring. And his wife in the wheelchair bends over and is kissing the ring for healing. You got it? I mean, they didn't know any better. I mean, totally assimilated Jews. And could you imagine what this is? This is like a person inhaling, taking the most lethal type of inhalant. That's what it is. What does that do to her neshama? What does it do to it? Destroys her. She doesn't know any better. You know what that is? But people, they envy that moment. You know what it means to get the audience to be able to kiss his ring for a healing. Maybe for a demise, not for a healing. That's lo mi'uktzach, lo miduvshach. I bring such glory to your name. All the nations of the world, I'm your prophet. God says, you know something? Don't do me any favors. I don't need you to be my prophet. I don't need you to be my representative. To be continued.